Cotton, partly because we have the opportunity to understand a little bit more about a really important economic crop with a big environmental footprint on Earth. So using the facilities of the space station to do things that we just could never do on Earth. And also, there have been a lot of plant biology experiments done by a lot of great researchers on the station, but on a relatively few species of plants. And so cotton is going to give us this fantastic tool to ask, how different is it from these other plants and how similar? What do all plants do when they're in space, and what does very specifically particular to each kind of plant?
Doctor, I'm so excited to see what you find out. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And one more notable payload I wanted to tell you about is the first satellite developed by the island nation of Mauritius. That's east of Madagascar, if you didn't know that. Its CubeSat, which is a small satellite about this big, will photograph the region and conduct experimental communication with other islands. So really cool there. Again, you know, just really fascinating payloads on today's mission. Now let's head back to Shiva for an update.
Thanks, Megan. We're just under T-minus 15 minutes and counting to the liftoff of a Falcon 9 carrying cargo Dragon on the next commercial resupply mission to the International Space Station. Now, as we talked about earlier, Dragon was designed with reusability in mind. To date, 9 of our cargo resupply missions have launched on flight-proven Dragon spacecraft. And while we have a history of reflying cargo vehicles and now crew vehicles with the successful launch of Crew 2, as of today, we will also reuse Dragon's heat shield structure for the first time. The heat shield flying today safely returned astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley to Earth on the Demo 2 mission last year. Reusability allows SpaceX to refly the most expensive parts of the spacecraft, and that in turn drives down the cost of space access. So while Dragon today is a new vehicle, there are a handful of components flying that have seen some space before, the heat shield structure just being one example. Now, speaking of new technologies, the astronauts on board the International Space Station are eagerly awaiting this next delivery of science to keep them busy on the world's only orbiting laboratory. We had a chance to catch up with a couple of them to hear about the work they've been doing since they arrived safely on the Crew 2 mission back in April.
Hi everyone, welcome to the International Space Station. I'm Aki Hoshide, and we're here during Expedition 65, and
I'm Megan MacArthur, one of the flight engineers for the mission. And you probably know we have a cargo mission coming up real soon, SpaceX 22. And I'm excited to see what that's going to be like. I think it's going to affect our pace and everything that we've got going on. Aki, you've seen this before. You captured actually the first cargo resupply mission from Dragon about 9 years ago. So tell me, what was that like?
Yeah, 9 years ago. That's a long, long time ago. Well, that was my first time to actually capture a cargo vehicle with a robotic arm, and so it was a horrifying 2 minutes, you know, holding my breath and trying to capture it without making any mistakes.
This cargo Dragon will be actually a little bit different. So what's different about this one?
This time it's just going to dock, so without the help of the robotic arm, it's going to automatically dock to the International Space Station.
And of course, it will be similar to our crewed vehicle that we came up in, so everything should look pretty much the same. Just there won't be people, there'll be cargo and a lot of science experiments. Some of the science samples will arrive in powered payload lockers, so they can be frozen temperatures. But some of the samples will arrive in this cooler type of bag, which is called a double cold bag. It's a super insulated bag, and we put ice bricks in there along with the samples to keep them at the right temperature. So I'll show you what that looks like. Oh, looks like we have a stowaway. These are the ice bricks, and they can maintain a temperature between minus 32 and plus 37 Celsius. They're just room temperature right now, or I wouldn't be holding them with bare hands. But you can see we would fill that up with the ice bricks as well as the samples. We also send samples home this way, and they have a certain amount of time that they will stay at temperature before they're recovered by the team on the ground. You know, I'm excited about the tardigrades. I told you about the water bears. Super excited about that. They're little microscopic creatures that can survive in extreme environments. And the cell science for experiment is looking at what can we see by looking at their genes? How do they survive and adapt to extreme environments? And then the hope is that that information can be used to look at stress factors in humans when we're living in space. Another one I think is really exciting that has benefits both for us in space but also on Earth is a new ultrasound experiment, the butterfly ultrasound, and it's looking at portable ultrasound technology with mobile tech. Some really exciting stuff that kind of covers a big spectrum.
Yeah.
And that was NASA astronaut Megan MacArthur and JAXA astronaut Aki Hoshide aboard the International Space Station. And welcome into the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas. The team of flight controllers in Mission Control Houston today is being led by Flight Director Rebecca Wingfield. The teams here in Mission Control will really jump into action tomorrow night into Saturday morning as Cargo Dragon approaches the International Space Station and enters the approach ellipsoid, which we like to think of as an imaginary sphere around the space station that helps us monitor the approach and departure of visiting vehicles. There are currently 7 crew members living and working aboard the International Space Station. Expedition 65 consists of NASA astronauts Shane Kimbrough, Megan MacArthur, and Mark Vandehei, Roscosmos cosmonauts Pyotr Dubrov and Oleg Novitsky, Aki Hoshide of JAXA, and Thomas Pesquet of the European Space Agency. One major component flying in Dragon's trunk today is the first pair of Boeing-made iROSA solar arrays, which will be installed to the 2B and 4B channels of the P6 truss by Thomas Pesquet and Shane Kimbrough over 2 spacewalks planned for June 16th and June 20th. This will be the first of 3 deliveries of these iROSA solar arrays. There will be 6 in all to upgrade and augment the power for the 6 of 8 power channels on the station. As Crew Dragon approaches the International Space Station in the morning hours on June 5th, NASA astronauts Shane Kimbrough and Megan MacArthur will be monitoring the arrival from the station's cupola. And once Dragon arrives to the station, it will dock to the Zenith port on the space-facing side of the station's Harmony module and will join 4 other spacecrafts: Crew Dragon, Cygnus 15, the Soyuz MS-18, and Progress 77. Cargo Dragon will remain attached to the International Space Station for about 1 month before being packed up with critical science and supplies and will splash down in the Atlantic Ocean for that science to be analyzed back here on Earth. Again, everything is still a go from here in Mission Control Houston, and we're looking forward to welcoming another vehicle to the International Space Station. So for now, we'll head back out to Kennedy. Megan.
It is now T-minus 8 minutes and counting until liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket and Cargo Dragon on the next resupply mission to the International Space Station. Now, you heard Courtney just mention the new solar arrays again. So let's take some time to go more in depth about those because they're really important to the station and what happens there. Take a look at your screen now. This is the first pair of the new Boeing-made ISS rollout solar arrays known as iROSA. They are compact panels you see there that roll open like a huge yoga mat, 63 by 20 feet each. Here they are inside the Space Station processing facility at the Kennedy Space Center before being packed inside Dragon. The space station currently has 8 pairs of solar arrays. The oldest pair has been in use for more than 20 years. The 2 new solar arrays, plus 4 more to be delivered later, will produce a total of more than 120 kilowatts of electricity. That is enough to power more than 40 U.S. homes. Once combined with the 8 original arrays, the new ones will boost power to the station up to 30%, maximizing use for the orbiting lab for many years to come. And these 2 new solar arrays, like Courtney said, are going to be installed this summer. Now let's head back over to Shiva for an update. Shiva?
Thanks, Megan. We're just over T-minus 7 minutes to go. The SpaceX team currently working no significant issues with the vehicles. At this point, Rocket Propellant 1 fuel is nearly fully loaded on the first stage, completely loaded on the second stage. Liquid oxygen loading is underway on both of the stages as well, and that'll complete at about T-minus 2 minutes to launch. We're also loading helium gas into both of the stages. Falcon 9 uses helium as a pressurant, that's to backfill the propellant tanks as we consume liquid oxygen in RP1 by the Merlin engines during ascent. The helium loading began before the webcast went live and will continue to top it off until about 1.5 minutes before launch. Now, to make sure that the engine startup goes well, we also perform what's called engine chill. It started at about T-minus 7 minutes. We flow a small amount of that super chilled liquid oxygen into the Merlin engine turbopumps, and we do that to avoid thermal shock to the mechanical components once we get that full flow of super chilled liquid oxygen on engine start. Dragon also began its startup sequence at T-minus 35 minutes when it coordinated timing with the Falcon 9. It's currently undergoing a set of vehicle health checks, with its next major milestone happening just before liftoff, when it'll transition to internal battery power. Now, the range is standing by, ready to support today's mission. Launch weather is continuing to trend favorably. We had a 60% chance of go, and we're still continuing to monitor some of those clouds and precipitation in the area. So with that, the launch team, Falcon 9, Dragon, the range, all looking good. Weather also trending good. And at about T-minus 5 minutes to go, I'm now joined by Marie to help me walk through these final moments of the terminal count. Marie?
Yeah, Shiva, as you said, weather trending in the better direction. It was a little bit hairy for a couple minutes there. Within the last, I want to say maybe 13 minutes or so. It was right around T-minus 19 or 18 minutes. We heard about some lightning strikes in the area, not coming within that 10-mile radius of the pad, but that was a watch item. It looks like they're not expecting lightning to be an issue to come that close. And that cell that I mentioned to the south of the pad looks like
Dragon has
there's going to be a little
transitioned
bit
to
more
configure for
separation
terminal count.
between that. A little bit more
Dragon
separation.
has transitioned to terminal count and is on internal power.
Okay, so we heard that call that Dragon is now on internal power. Again, as Shiva mentioned, the team has already conducted its pre-launch engine chill. Again, this is when SpaceX injects a small amount of super chilled liquid oxygen to prepare those Merlin engines inside the first stage to allow for full propellant flow during flight. And we can hear the hissing from some of that liquid oxygen venting off the side of the rocket as it meets that
Strong on back retract in progress.
We just heard the call out there as well for strong back retract. The strong back is the truss structure next to Falcon 9 that provides propellants and power to the vehicle. So you can see the clamp arms are opening around the second stage, and the strong back will retract a couple of degrees away from the vertical position, helping to clear the way for Falcon 9's ascent. In these last few minutes, Falcon 9 is performing a set of health checks on its primary communications, avionics, and propulsion systems in preparation for flight. We'll continue to hear call-outs. The engines are sufficiently chilled in, and for some of these milestones that are coming up next. And there you can see the strong back starting its retraction away from the vertical position.
And so we saw that strong back or transport erector retract ever so slightly from the Falcon 9 rocket. It will retract fully
bleed verification.
just as we get to the moment of liftoff to allow for Falcon 9 to clear the pad. Also happening now are some checks of the second stage thrust vector control actuators. That is often referred to as an engine wiggle test, and this is when SpaceX moves the thrust
Stage
nozzles.
1 complete.
And we just heard the call for the stage 1 LOX load complete. Again, that engine wiggle test happening now to make sure that the guidance hardware is go for flight. SpaceX will do the exact same checkouts on the first stage engines, and that will happen just a few seconds before ignition.
Yeah, and we just heard that call out for first stage LOX load complete. Next major activity here will be second stage LOX load complete. Usually happens around the T-2 minute mark, and that wraps up propellant loading for Falcon 9 until liftoff. Dragon also continuing to perform final health checks
Stage
to make
2
sure
LOX
all
load
of
complete.
its systems are ready to go for
Dragon is in
ascent
auto
and
idle.
rendezvous with the International Space Station. Weather continuing to trend favorably as Dragon transitions into its ascent state.
weather remaining go as we are approaching the T-minus 1 minute mark when Dragon will transition to internal power.
Falcon 9's in startup. Dragon is in countdown. LD, go for launch.
The launch director. Launch director pulled
Stage
go
2,
for
press for
launch.
flight.
So with that, all systems are currently go. We're just over T-minus 30 seconds to liftoff.
T-minus 30 seconds.
And at T0, the rocket will be released from the hold down clamps at the pad. And as I mentioned earlier, that strong back right next to the rocket will retract the rest of the way, clearing the way for liftoff.
Stage 1, press for flight.
T-minus 15 seconds.
Falcon 9 is configured for flight.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
And liftoff of the 22nd SpaceX cargo resupply mission, bringing new solar arrays to the International Space Station.
Stage 1, propulsion is nominal.
We're at T-plus 40 seconds into flight. Awesome shot looking
Power and
back
telemetry
at
nominal.
the Cape, where Falcon 9 has launched. We're coming up on the next major milestone. That's the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure. That's when the
Falcon 9 is
stresses on the
supersonic.
vehicle will be the highest.
Execute.
So in preparation for maximum aerodynamic pressure, we throttled down those Merlin 1D engines. Now that we're through that point, we'll throttle back up and continue on to the next of our sequence of events. We have several happening in rapid succession. That'll be main engine cutoff, followed by a stage separation. Then we'll have a first stage flip maneuver, second engine start, number 1, and then a boost back burn on the first stage. Now, main engine cutoff, or MECO, that's where all 9 of the Merlin 1D engines on the first stage will shut down. That's followed shortly after by stage separation, when both the first and second stages will separate. From there, the first stage will flip to prepare itself for entry. A few seconds later, the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite to boost the Dragon into a low Earth orbit. That's called SES-1. And then finally, on the first stage, we'll have boost back burn start to slow down the first stage in preparation for re-entry. So again, those 5 events: MECO, stage separation, first stage flip maneuver, second engine start, and then the boost back burn, all coming up just in under 10 seconds from now.
And MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
Stage 1 boost back startup.
So successful Merlin vacuum engine startup. First stage has begun its boost back burn. That burn expected to last about 30 or so seconds. Here's a shot of the second stage Merlin vacuum nozzle. You can see it starting to heat up as we begin this burn. The second stage will continue to burn here for several minutes until about the T+8 minute mark.
Stage 1 boost back shutdown.
If you're just joining us, welcome. You're watching a live webcast for the 22nd commercial resupply mission to the International Space Station for NASA. This is SpaceX's 17th launch of the year, and we are flying a cargo configuration of our new Dragon spacecraft. On the right-hand side of your screen is the second stage, which is carrying the Dragon spacecraft into orbit. On the left-hand side of your screen, you can see Falcon 9's first stage with the grid fins extending. It just completed its boost back burn and is making its way back to our drone ship. Now, the rocket has to do more than just go up. It has to go sideways really fast. At liftoff, gravity is pulling straight down on the rocket, but as we ascend, we tilt the engines, that's called gimbaling, and that begins to turn the rocket horizontally. We're still going up, but we're also heading horizontally away from the launch pad. That maneuver is called a gravity turn. The rocket typically needs to go about 7.5 kilometers per second, or about 17,500 miles an hour, to avoid being pulled back down to Earth and to get into orbit. So that's what the second stage is doing right now. Now, the first stage, in order to make its way back to our drone ship, named, of course, I Still Love You, it has 2 more burns to do. First is an entry burn. It'll ignite 3 of its Merlin 1 engines. That'll help to slow it down as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. And then the next activity will happen much closer to the drone ship. That is the landing burn. Will ignite just the single center Merlin engine to bring the vehicle's speed rapidly down to 0. You can see the grid fins that are extended on the left-hand side of your screen. We use those for atmospheric control. They help steer the Falcon 9 to make sure we make our way back to that drone ship as we get into the thicker parts of the Earth's atmosphere. And you'll occasionally see periodic bursts of a white gas like that. That's our attitude control system, giving us little corrections to our attitude. The next major event coming up here for the first stage is entry burn. 3 of the Merlin 1D engines will ignite. Second stage burn continuing to look nominal. Second stage has a little ways to go. It won't be done with this burn until about the T+8 minute mark.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Trajectory nominal. Stage 1 entry burn startup.
So with that, 3 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage igniting to reduce the vehicle's velocity. You can see that on the bottom left corner of your screen. This burn expected to last
Stage 1
about
entry
20
burn shutdown.
seconds. So from here, the grid fins will continue to take the first stage towards our drone ship stationed out in the Atlantic Ocean. At this point, T+6.5 minutes into flight, second stage is making its way to the initial orbit to drop off the Cargo Dragon spacecraft. And if you're just joining us, welcome. On your screen is a live view of Falcon 9's first stage on the left, the second stage on the right. We had an on-time liftoff at 1:29 p.m. Eastern Time. Nominal ascent so far. Talking a little bit more about
Stage 1 transonic.
Talking a little bit more about the first stage. So the next major event coming up is that landing burn. Landing burn is what will bring the vehicle speed rapidly down to 0. Amazing shots
Stage
of the
1
first
landing
stage
burn startup.
during re-entry. Once we get closer to the drone ship, we will deploy our 4 symmetric landing legs around the base of the first stage for hopefully a nice soft touchdown on that drone ship. You can see a shot of that on the right-hand side of your screen.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
Picture perfect landing of that Falcon 9 for the
Stage 1
first
landing
stage.
confirmed.
First landing for this first stage. 86 successful recovery overall for SpaceX. Fantastic. Now coming up shortly, second stage is not done. It will be coming up on second engine cutoff.
Terminal guidance.
About under 30 seconds from now. It's been burning that whole time since stage separation to bring the 7,000 pounds of cargo into the initial orbit around our planet. And you can
Stage
see
2
we're
FTS is saved.
getting close to orbital velocity.
Expected loss of signal.
Seco.
Shutdown of the second stage engine. From here, we'll be looking at telemetry, make sure we are in the intended orbit.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Fantastic. So it's at the second stage, has just one major task left. It is commanding separation of the Dragon spacecraft just a few minutes from now. Until separation, the second stage will be making some small adjustments during this coast prior to Dragon separation. And we're hoping to have video, there's some video, into the unpressurized cargo section of Dragon. This video from the top of the second stage. We got a good look there at the new rollout solar arrays that Cargo Dragon is bringing to the International Space Station. So separation of the Dragon spacecraft expected at about T+12 minutes. We have a little bit of a coast here for ground operators in mission control behind me to ensure that the vehicle is in the right configuration, that there's no conditions that we may want to watch out for after separation. But Dragon and the Stage 2 right now in orbit. And coming up after that separation event, which hopefully we'll get a view like this of Dragon gently floating away, the Dragon spacecraft will begin to perform some of its own checkouts. Dragon is equipped with 12 service section Draco thrusters that are used primarily for attitude control and proximity next to the space station. It's also got 4 Draco thrusters on the top of the vehicle underneath its nose cone that we use for our thrust maneuvers to help us rendezvous with the International Space Station. So again, successful ascent, successful recovery of our first stage just a few minutes ago. You're looking at a live shot into the Cargo Dragon unpressurized section from the second stage that is in orbit around our planet. Our next major activity coming up shortly, that is Dragon separation from Falcon 9's second stage. Something a little bit different about this Dragon spacecraft. If you followed our first version of Dragon, you'd know that it had deployable solar arrays. This version of Dragon has conformal solar arrays on the body of the spacecraft. So those are mounted along the exterior panel of the trunk that we're looking into right now. Those provide power for the spacecraft as it makes its way to the space station.
Dragon separation confirmed.
Lovely planet Earth on the left-hand side, Dragon floating away. You can see the rollout solar arrays from this view atop Falcon 9 second stage, watching Dragon gently float away. So again, activities coming up for Dragon. It will begin its service section Draco checkouts, followed shortly after that by the nose cone
Expected loss of signal.
opening. And that's going to complete my coverage here from Hawthorne. But why don't we check in with Courtney at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Courtney?
Thanks, Shiva. Again, just standing by for that nose clone deploy. The nose cone deploy uncovers the 4 forward bulkhead thrusters, which Dragon will use for its major burn maneuvers coming up. And nose cone hooks are driving now. And the hooks are halfway open, again standing